data modeling, and I've seen a lot of them. I'll start out by talking about some stuff that I've seen as a consultant. Got one consulting company, and the guy hired me because he's like, it takes forever for my team to generate Power BI reports. And I looked, and the ratio of report to model was 1-to-1. And if that is your scenario, you're doing it wrong, and you're going to have issues because that's not the kind of model that's sustainable for long-term development. So I want to talk about some things and that make a sustainable long-term development, and then some tips and tricks for what you can do to improve your Power BI model and what things you need to think of when you are creating it. A little bit about me. My name is Ginger Grant. I am from Arizona, and I am a Microsoft MVP and a Microsoft certified trainer. And I have been using Power BI since the Excel days and the 4 powers. So been playing with it for a number of years and talking to the product team about stuff that they're doing as well. So let's talk about modeling. So one of the things that's important to think about when you are modeling for performance is thinking about 80-20 and what you are going to be doing and how you need to support that. I was working for a very large insurance company, healthcare insurance specifically. And I was talking to them about I looked at all of the reports for this particular division. They had over 450 different reports. And I looked at all of them. And I was looking at how much data that they were using in the reports. And they said, nope, we always use 5 years of data. And I said, well, you know how many reports that you have that are actually using 5 years of data? And they hadn't looked at them all. They said, well, no. And I said, 0. So you've got a data model that is 3 years larger than anybody's using. Why? And they're like, well, because that's what the rec said. So if you have a scenario where a majority of the people are going to be accessing and using the data in a specific way, that's how you need to build a model. And for those outside use cases, give them a model, their own model, so that not everybody has to suffer because somebody somewhere is doing something weird. There's also some specific design considerations that you need to think about for very large data models because they don't work the same way. And there are things that you need to consider and change the way that you're doing stuff to improve performance for those. And when I say large data models, I'm talking about something greater than 10 gig. So what are you going to do if you've got one of those? Oh, by the way, that exceeds the ability of Power BI desktop to upload them if it's greater than 10 gigs. So what are you going to do? And then looking at aggregation tables and different types of models that you can choose to incorporate in Power BI and how those can be used to improve performance. So let's talk about data model decisions. When you're thinking about how much data you're going to put in Power BI, you may be confronted with the fact that because storage is so cheap, people have ridiculous amounts of data saved. I was at a bank and they had 20 years of data. Of course, they redid all their products 18 months ago, so all of that old stuff they can't use presently. So that's something you need to think about. Just because you have all that data, what can you do with it? I mean, legal may say, hey, you should keep the data forever, and that's true. But if you're looking to provide reports for decision making, you don't need that data. As a matter of fact, you don't want that data. It's the off use case. And again, going with that 80-20 rule, that time that legal wants it, well, that's the time you need to mess with it and not before. So when you're talking about actionable data, what is actionable data? So is it like everything pre-COVID? Will that help you identify what's going on right now? I would say no. That's a big no, because things have changed quite a bit since the before times, and trying to draw conclusions based on what happened in 2019 is a giant waste of time. There's no reason to have that data in there. Last 2 years is really actionable information. What I have for nearly all my clients is I have this year to date, last year, and the previous year. And that is able to provide them actionable information that they need. So that's the kind of thing that you want to think about. Don't put 10 years of data because it's not data that's used for real decision making. And that's what Power BI is for. So just provide information, not just giant piles of data, because that doesn't help anybody. So another thing to think about is like just your general standard, how I should model Power BI rule. It's funny, I was talking to some people on Twitter about this about a couple weeks ago. And, you know, the whole like, should we do it in DAX? Should we do it in M? Well, the standard rule is that if it's possible to do it in the data source, for example, you're connecting to an Azure SQL DB, write a view. And in that view, you can, you know, fix all the column names, add any columns that you need to do. If you can't do that, because that's not your world, for whatever reason, then you bring it into M, and then you manipulate it in M. And very lastly, you do it in DAX. There is an exception to that. And I didn't know the answer to this question, so I did what I generally do and put it out on Twitter. And I was talking specifically about date tables. And I said, well, if I want to create a date table and make it a date table that is related to the data that I've got in my Power BI model, so it's not, you know, 100 years worth of data, it's just the date that is dates that are being used within my data. Where should I create that? M or DAX? It doesn't matter. And Marco Russo, of all people, responded, and he said, because your date table should not be very large, it doesn't matter. Okay, that's the answer for me. If Marco Russo says it doesn't matter between M or DAX, I'm doing it in DAX because I like doing it in DAX, it's a little easier. So that would be the exception. And I'm going with his recommendation since he told me that, which I would not have guessed. And the other thing that you want to remember, if you're talking about performance and modeling, it is not the same as databases. So because it is not the same as databases, you need to think about how the Vertac Engine is working. And the Vertac Engine is similar to, maximum data transformation. Is the Vertac Engine is similar to column store. So you're looking at columns, not rows. So it's a column-based index. And so for that, it stores the index in dictionary encoding. And that means it's going to translate things internally. What that means specifically is while it might be better to have join based on numeric values, which, you know, and it's not that huge of a thing because it's going to be transposed anyway. So there's no reason, for example, to have a date key in a date table. And I would actually recommend not doing that because that screws up some of the filtering that you might want to do to decrease the amount of data that you are evaluating in DAX. So if you are joining a date, I would join with a date because with dictionary encoding, it really doesn't matter. So how does dictionary encoding really work? Well, a dictionary aliases everything to numeric. So yes, it's one more step if it's not numeric already, but it's not that big of a step. And the compression is best when the data is sorted and there are a few unique values. And since it's reading columns, it's column sorts. So sort your data when you load it. So here's an example of a dictionary entry. And in this particular dictionary entry that I have made up here, I've got 3 different kinds of fruits. I have orange, bananas, and pears. And because my data is not sorted, I have my dictionary entry looks like this. I got 1 orange, 1 banana, 2 pears, 1 banana, 1 pear, 1 orange, 1 pear, 1 orange. So these are all the dictionary entries that are required for this particular column. But if I sort it, I have 3. So that decreases, that means that my compression is a lot better because my data is sorted. Another thing that you'll notice is that sale date. I've got date and time. Do you really need that? Look at all of the duplicate data that I have because I've chosen to include the time. And not only the time down to the second. I maintain nobody needs to see the time down to the second. And when I've got this kind of data, then I've got more unique values, more dictionary entries, less compression that's possible. So if I change this to just doing the dates, because I don't care about the time, I've got 4 entries instead of 10, which is why you never want to include time. And if you do, only midnight. So make sure that you separate your date from your time and never include seconds. And think if you can get down to, I actually was working for a company where they were actually measuring productivity of people packing boxes in a warehouse. And really, they only cared about the hour. And I asked them, like, do you need minutes? And they're like, well, we really look at how productive people are by the hour. So that's all they really cared about. So we just changed it to hours. So again, 24 entries, so makes it compression better. So continually think about what you can do to reduce the granularity. If there's any kind of key, if you don't really need it, lose it. If you don't need it, get rid of it. So views, of course, this is the best practice when you are creating, if you're connecting to a database, use views. So one of the things that you can do with a view is you can sort it. And that means when your data is coming in, it's pre-sorted. So this allows you to, and another thing about views is if you do that, then you can control that. And for all of you DBA types, like, you can't sort views. Yes, you can. And I got this tip from Adam Mechanic. Percent doesn't work, by the way, but top does. So if you put top and ridiculously large number, then you can sort the contents of your view coming in. And I'm sorting by item group, which has 2 entries in it. So if you use views and you use the select top, you can sort them. And this is going to further improve the compression that you're going to be able to do because your dictionary is going to contain less stuff. So it doesn't work the same way if you sort it within M. But that can help as well if that's the only thing. But this works better if you bring it coming in. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is that this still matters. The definitive guide, data warehouse toolkit, the old standby. And funny enough, I was working for a very large defense contractor a year ago. These people had money to burn. Love consulting for places like that. Anyway, so they had created their own, they were connecting to PeopleSoft, and the dude abides, yes. They're connecting to PeopleSoft, and they were changing the back end so we went from PeopleSoft to SAP. So the functionality of the reports was supposed to stay the same. We're just completely changing out the back end. And I looked at it, and in the second chapter of Kimball's Book of Data Modeling, it talks about what you should do if you have order and detail. For those of you who have not read Kimball's book or read it recently, the second chapter says that if you have order and detail, that should go into one fact table, not 2, 1. Well, guess what they did? They did 2. So it's people haven't read the book and they're still making the same mistakes that he found when he wrote this thing, 30 years ago now? It's a long time. That's why he's retired. So do not create needless dimensions. I know a lot of times people feel like, oh, more dimensions better. No, you don't want to have a ton of dimensions. Stack that stuff. You should not have a whole bunch of dimensions that have one item in them, because then that gets to be ridiculous because of all of the additional joins that you have to do. You should try to have your dimensions need to be relatively fat, more than one column fat. And if you're like, I'm not a book person, you can go to the www.kimballgroup.com and read all of their stuff. So they've got a number of good stuff. I have looked at a couple of other books and I've actually bought and read a couple of them. This one's still the best, and it's old. But you still need to figure out how you're going to organize the data. What are your thoughts on ordinal dimension tables? I don't like them, and I don't think they work well in Power BI.
Got it. So it would be, sorry.
Go ahead.
So it would be preferable to add a calculated column or a custom column with an order if you were wanting to kind of have an order column.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. And I would do that in M. So yes. Because again, it's not about when you're doing different things, you got to think about not how somebody did it that worked well in that system, but how it works well in Power BI. And Power BI has specific modeling rules. You have one key, you can't do multiple keys. you have the row level dimensions that you're going to have to deal with. So try not to have a large number of fact tables, but make sure you have fact tables. That's still important. So Star Schema, all the things. I know I saw it was at a conference, data conference, and I saw somebody who had this t-shirt. I don't remember who it was though. So your facts are your actions. They could be things like a doctor's visit, an enrollment record, an order. These are your facts, and your dimensions should skate off all of these. And if you don't do it like this, I will say that you have a number of different problems that you're going to have to deal with. The big one is security. If you do not have fact and dimensions like this, filtering on security is a nightmare. So if you're like, well, it still works. Yes, it does. Good luck getting that security to work though. If you blow this off and you're like, it'll be fine. Well, you run into problems. Donald Parrish, did he have the Star Schema, all the things shirt?
Yeah, he just bought it recently, so I was asking him where he got it from because he knows where it came from.
Yeah, I saw somebody with it on. So think about this, and basically you're like, I have no idea how to do this. It's this. It still matters, and it still makes a difference. And the bigger your data model is, the more this starts to matter on what you can do it. So why do the Star Schema stuff? Basically, it's easy to use and understand. It's easier to aggregate at faster queries, and basically it's necessary for Power BI. So that's why you need to do it. When you can either, there's two choices. If you do the Power BI, you can either say, I'm going to decide to do Power BI like when you're starting out, or your other choice is you're going to wish you did later. Those are your two choices. So you can either start out by making a Star Schema, or you can wish you did. You will wish you did, because it causes problems in your modeling. So thinking about your dimensions, wide tables, fewer joins, faster. This is why you do not want to have a whole bunch of dimensions with one column in them. Duplicated values are preferable to additional joins. So decrease it. So don't have, like, I looked at a model recently and they're like, we did like the great data modeling thing, and we had every single key with one item in it. It's a nightmare. Don't do that. Integer keys will provide the best performance because then it will skip that translation, but it's not essential. And you may need to retain the original business keys, because I've seen that's for validation. You have to do that. And include your source, but maybe not include it in your Power BI model. Maybe you put it and you filter that out in M, but have it so that you can look at it should you really need to do. So don't have dimensions with two columns in it. It gets to be a problem. So you may have other types of dimensions. You may have degenerate dimensions. I always like that name because I think of the person who told me, and I'm like, yeah, I get it, degenerate. But these are dimensions in the fact table, and you may want to do that because it decreases your joins. If you do have degenerate dimensions in the fact table, you may have issues with filtering. You may not. You got to think about that one. And then you might have conform dimensions, and that has the same meaning for every fact. And then, of course, there's role-playing dimensions. Resist the desire to have multiple date tables. I was working with a client. They're like, well, we need another date table. And I'm like, let's take, and no joke, in their fact table, they had 9 different dates. Original promise date, actual promise date, ship date, delivery date, manufactured, all these dates. They're like, we need a date table for each one of those. And I said, no, we do not. Because again, I don't care how you copy your date table. And I have done this test. This is not like, I actually proved it to them. I don't have that test here now, but you can test it yourself. And if you copy a date table, I don't care how you do it, you just increase the size of your model. And having a smaller model is always better. which means that instead of do the role playing dimensions, have not, 8 different inactive relationships on your date table. And then, as Sarah correctly pointed out, right, use relationship decks. So that is always the answer. Do not do that. And let's see other stupid mistakes that I've seen. You do not need a date table for your fiscal year and for the regular year. No, all goes in one. Holidays, throw that in there. Don't have multiple date values that are not in your date table. So yeah, clean them out. Hi, Russ. Clean them out. The days of having multiple date tables, those are in the before times, and don't do it. It just increases the size. And the whole idea of why you care so much about performance is so that you never get this model's terrible, I don't want to use it, it's too slow. You want to make it so you never hear that. And then you also want to look online to see if it really got slower than just a bunch of whiners, but that's another conversation. So keep that in mind when you're doing your model. So fact tables, they should not contain values found in dimension. I actually have seen this. They're like, well, it's just easier. No. If you have a dimension, then you have a key. You don't have values in your dimension in your fact table. Don't do that. It just makes things messy. You do not need a unique key in your fact table. Again, what do you need that for? You're not joining it to anything, and having a unique value means that you have a dictionary entry with one entry for each row. Bad. Makes things slow. You don't need a unique key in your fact table. If you have one, take it out. It's for transactions or events, and you need to have the appropriate level of granularity. What's appropriate? For example, I was working on for a company, and we were doing a whole bunch of actual to budget, and they budgeted monthly. If they budget monthly, I don't need daily, because there's no sense in having a daily fact table when I'm comparing to monthly. That's over granulation. So what I did is I did month to date, and everything else was monthly. Makes for a smaller model, better report. And you're like, well, wait a minute. What about all the daily data? I had a different model for that. But keep that in mind that, you don't necessarily have to have a Lord of the Rings model. Have one with the appropriate level of granularity for what you need. And I certainly did not need daily information for a report that we're comparing to monthly values. So keep that in mind when you're doing it. Also, again, granularity, minimum required. And this is going to control your base table size. So the smaller you can make it, that improves your analysis. And this will then improve the performance of your different aggregations that you're doing. All of your calculate statements will be improved. And try not to use many to many. They're like, yes, but the data's like that. Well, create a bridge table and hide the bridge table, because what you lose with the performance, the loss of the joins is going to be more. So every single time you join to it, it'll be slower. So just create a bridge table and be done with it. Yes, you can do many to many. You shouldn't. The other thing to think about also when you're creating relationships, unless you have a really good reason, like it won't work any other way, don't do single direction, not cross joins. Those double arrows should not be there unless it's the only way you can make it work. Or security, which of course is the only way you can make that work. So that's an important consideration to make. Now, large files, if you've got a file that's going to be greater, or if it's more than like 10 gig, you're kind of in trouble. So what you want to do in that scenario is you want to filter it using parameters. And once you have it loaded up into the Power BI service, then you can change your parameters to reflect the actual data. So I did this with a model, and yes, if you're talking about large data, you're talking premium. But if they have a model over 10 gig and they want to do reports off of it, hey, it's their data. They have to know that that's what's going to cost them. If that's not the case, then you have other things you're going to have to do. So what I did, because I wanted to make it work, wanted to upload quickly, is I created a filter using a parameter for 1 month's worth of data, because that loaded really, really fast. And then as soon as I loaded it up into the Power BI service, I changed my parameter to back on, 3 years. So 2 years plus the current year. And then I did the refresh, and it refreshed in the service, because I can't do that locally. So keep that in mind to do that. So basically, with parameter loads, your large data models have a size limitation. You could still only load 1 gig, and then you can use parameters and then fix it in the service. So do that. The other thing too to remember, if you if you decide to use incremental refresh on your data model, that's the last day you're going to be able to download your Power BI, which is just another reason to use real source control, because now we can with PBIT files, because you can't download after that. So keep that in mind as well. So data marks. Okay, there's 2 data marks that I wanted to address here. The first one is the preview feature in Power BI. I hate it. The reason why I hate it is because it's direct query, and direct query equals slow. So if you use that preview feature for data mart where it's creating that virtual Azure SQL DB, sounds awesome, but it's direct query. And if it's direct query, that means everything is slow. And the more people you have, the commands you're sending to it, meh, it's terrible. But there's another kind of data mart that you do want to do, and that's your outlier reports. Budget reports, perfect outliers, because those are monthly granularity. That could be considered a data mart. So it depends on your perspective. If you're talking about the Power BI preview feature, though, I would stay away from it. The architecture for that is just suboptimal, and it's not going to help you perform well. I have tried to get direct query to work on several different occasions, and with direct query, what happens is, of course, you have people that are sending queries to your data source. And the more people you have, the more queries you send, and it just starts bogging down. I tried to make it work twice, and I ended up doing incremental updates every half an hour instead. The only way I could get it to work. I do want to talk about a solution to that, but that's a tease for what I'm going to talk about. And then aggregation tables. So aggregation tables are something that you will need to do in large data models to make sure that, yeah, it's PBIP. If I said the wrong letters, that's what I meant. Sorry. The aggregation tables are what you need to create if you've got a very large data model and it's just bogging down when you're doing the aggregations. Because, for example, I was working for, and this is really kind of funny, this farm company, and they're selling pigs. And they sell a lot of pigs, and the pigs are sold in lots. And most of the time, they only care about the lots. But every so often, they want to go down to the pig level. Not very many reports. And if they do, they're filtering it. So you only want like these pigs. So we had a lot of extra data in there, but the majority of the time, we were aggregating the lot level. So if you're aggregating at the lot level, then you can build a aggregation table and use that for the majority of your queries, rather than going through this million pig file, or table rather, to aggregate everything up that you needed to do most of the time. So aggregation tables are definitely something that you want to do, and you need to, but here's the kicker though, you have to configure your DAX to use it too. So let's take a look at actually how you might do that. So I've got a model here. And yes, it's AdventureWorks because I'm lazy. And in my data model, I've got sales. This is like your classic thing here. And I'm going to blow this up so you can actually see it. So your standard data model with sales going on here. Now, let's say, hypothetically speaking, that that I'm doing a lot of aggregates, and the sales table is at the daily level. So if I'm creating a bunch of reports that don't need it at the daily level, I might want to just include an aggregated version of this so that I can do that. So what I will do is in SQL Server, I will create a view, and my view here is sales aggregation. And if we look at that, what I'm doing here is I'm pre-aggregating my values for sales amount and for order quantity. Now, when you decide to build an aggregation table, it's probably because you're already experiencing performance problems and or you know exactly what kind of reports that you're going to be generating, because the kicker on this is you need to know what you're going to be doing it by. Now, if you do direct query, there's this like really cute tool, Power BI, and you can do it automatically. Yeah, not doing that. So I'm going to be creating my own aggregation table and then including that in my model. Now, this will work out well if that, if I'm doing a lot maybe by date, and I might do this by month, or if I'm just doing it for this one. Let's say that most of the majority of my reports are done by sales territory key and order date, not the date, but I might want to do just the year. So if I can do something like this, where I'm doing, actually this should be, that's right. Of and then grouping it by this way. So this is the kind of thing. Now, the other thing too is that if I was doing this, writing this correctly, if I'm doing this right, I never have a date that's a year, because again, years count. So if I'm going to be joining to my date table, and I will, this is not acceptable because this will be a many-to-many condition. So instead of doing this, I will want to then add, I shouldn't have done this on the fly. I want to add that I want to do this on the 1st plus the year, because if I don't write it this way, then I will have a many-to-many. So I want to do this plus the year of my order date. So, creating it this way, and I think, can I do is BOF a year, BOY a year, BOY a year? Man, I don't write enough SQL anymore. I used to know stuff on top of my head. But this is how I want to format it so that it will join appropriately to my date table and to my sales territory key. So if I'm grouping by this, what I'm going to go ahead and do, and I won't fix my order year here, but this is how I should do it. And then of course format it so this is correct. This works out correctly. So if I go to my data model, I'm going to add that new table. Come on. Oops. So naturally, of course, I've parameterized out my server. So a new source, SQL Server, and using my parameters for my database server, my database name, I'm going to import, and then, oh, it's freaking local. Wow. Yeah. And that'll give me the 1st of the year, Tim. That'll give me the 1st.
That's going to give you the year.
Yeah.
So
yeah, so if that just gives me the year, then that's not going to be an appropriate level join, because then I would join the many to year to the many to date, and I don't ever want that.
Yeah, what you can do is date from parts.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you calculate the year And then
Yeah.
the second and third arguments are 1 and 2, 1 and 1. That gives you your
Right.
date.
Like I did it, but I didn't do it. I know I didn't do the SQL right. I do not know why I am getting an issue in trying to connect to my SQL server. Sucker's running. This is loaded on my own machine. This is ridiculous. Well, what I want to do, I'm going to actually. Crazy. I've never not been able to. I obviously did not make the appropriate level of sacrifices to the demo gods because there's no reason that I shouldn't be able to add a database onto a source for my own server that I've got running now. Oops. Well, I'm going to see what I can do. Well, if I had appropriately sacrificed the demo gods, oh, I know why. No, I'm not signing in right. Then what I would do is I would add that table to my model and I would join it to the places that I needed to. So if I was doing it just to sales territory and then to date, I would join it there and then I would write DAX for those aggregations that would use that table and that table would be hidden. And I'm very sorry that for whatever reason, I can't connect to my own darn database on my damn machine. So never seen that happen. So for whatever reason, but I would add that table here and use that aggregation in my model. But I would hide it so that the only way that it would ever be referenced is if somebody wrote DAX to it. Because that gets confusing as all get out. If someone's like, what's this for? So you definitely want to make sure you do that. And again, I know that I hacked the SQL. So the SQL's not exactly right, but always make sure that you're doing an actual, if you're ever joining to a month or a year, it's got to be a date, not the year, because then again, many to many, you never want that. So, and I would join it to this. And so I would basically join my sales territory and my date. Yeah. Oh, is that for the shirt? Cool. So sorry that that model didn't do it, but that's what you do need to be doing. So basically the other thing that you remember is, and this is actually a really big point that you need to do, is that you need to make sure that your data model is separate from your reports. And I was at a client and they're like, well, ours is together. That would be like way too much work to be able to separate that. So we can't do that. And I'm like, oh, really? Watch this. I can do it in 5 minutes. And they're like, nuh-uh. I'm like, okay, I'm good like that. So let me show you how, if you have it together, how easy it is. Hopefully I can connect to my database when I do this. How easy it is to separate a report that has both of them in there. So let's see if this one will. I'm opening up a new Power BI report. And this has the data and the model together. And I'm going to separate it in about 5 minutes, all it takes. So if you have that and you're like, it's too much work, I'm not going to do that. It's not that big of a deal. All right, I have to make sure that I can refresh this. All right. This is basically a DAX, something that I wrote to do a lot of DAX testing. So it's not pretty, but it does do DAX testing. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say file, save as, and I'm going to call this the DFW Acme sales demo. So I'll go ahead and
watch out for that coyote.
Very funny. All right. And let's do this, so, in demos. Typing skills. Well, since I live in the desert, I thought that was hysterical. So there you go. So I'm going to go ahead and publish this. And I'm going to publish this to my Acme workspace. And I'm going to go ahead and do that. So the sales is publishing now. So when this is done, so that is going to be the data model, and this is going to be the report, and I'm going to separate it. So I'm going to do a file, save as for this, and browse, put this in the same place, and I'm going to call this the report for Acme DAX demo. All right, so I want this to connect to that data model. So what I'm going to do is delete everything. And yes, this breaks my report. So delete. It was funny when I told somebody this, they're like, well, we only have 15 minutes left in this meeting. I'm like, no problem. And they're like, yeah, it's not gonna work. All right. I now have no data. Data's gone. So I'm gonna get data. Power BI data sets. Acme DAX, DFW Acme DAX demo. Gonna get it. Want everything. I have just separated my model from my report. No problem. Done. So if someone says, well, I don't have it, it's too hard to do. No, it isn't. That's all you need to do. And then you have everything separated. So if you are doing a live connection to SAS, yes, because you should not have your data model in Power BI. It should be only in SAS. So wherever you have it, do not have your model and your report going together. And if you need to separate it, again, it's not that big of a deal to do what I just did to separate them. So someone says, oh, it's too hard, not gonna do it. You're like, no. No reason for not separating it. Now, for large data models, you have a choice. Where do you want to spend your money? Azure Analysis Services, large data models, and Power BI Premium. For the money, you get more stuff with Power BI Premium. You get, yeah, the junk people put in the other reports. I would still make that separate because you don't want your model in your reports and you want to be able to share that. And you can't share it if it's in a report. So yes, I would create a model for that. So you get more stuff if you spend your money with Power BI Premium because you get pipelines, you get source control, you get many other features other than large data models. And analysis services, you get Azure Data Analysis Services. So you're going to have to spend the money, spend it in Power BI, more features. So composite models. Okay, there's two ways of doing this. If you have a model in Power BI, and so you connect two models into your Power BI, it's gonna stink because you just made it direct query. So you cannot bring in two models into Power BI without performance taking a dump. So don't do that. I did that. I'm like, ah, crap, I just made this direct query. So you cannot join. It sounds all well and good with the documentation, but if you bring in two different models and join them together in Power BI, you just got yourself direct query. Don't do that. So instead, what you can do if you want to do any kind of composite data modeling, you can use the data flow, and then you won't have that issue. And so for years, actually, I'm like, what the hell do I want to use data flows for? The reason you want to use data flows is because they can have different refresh cadences. So they don't have to be refreshed at the same time. In addition to, you can use them in multiple models. So, but don't use composite data models. You make everything direct query when you do that. So there is something new that you might want to mess with, is that's direct lake. So what is that? Well, it's a preview feature. And it is a method of querying without importing at speed. And so if you've got greater than 10 gig, this could be a solution for you. But it uses Delta Parquet files loaded into one link. So that's what the format is. And it's available only in premium P SKUs or F SKU, which really sounds bad when you say that fast. So that is the only way that you can use Direct Lake. But with Direct Lake, you do get speeds approaching import. It's really, really fast. But this is what it looks like. So with the Direct Lake model, you have to get it from a lake house or a warehouse. Well, I've not seen anybody who transactionally updates either an Azure data lake or a data warehouse. Kind of a problem, because that's the only source you can connect to. You cannot connect to a database, which is unfortunate. So you're going to have to write a process if you're updating a database all the time to migrate that data, probably using like data factory to get it into the lake so that you can use Direct Lake. So that is kind of a major caveat for the re-architecting that you're going to have to do to make it work. But if you're doing that, it will be fast as preview. And if you're going to do it too, you need to provision your XMLA endpoints and enable and provision a lakehouse as well to make that work. So if you want to do Direct Lake, that's what's required. But limitations. Data is only available from one lakehouse if you create it using Fabric. You can't do any kind of combo modeling, so no data flows, no calculated columns or tables. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but I do like putting my DAX in them. No views, no calculation groups, and you need to write something to update the lake with the latest data, and it won't work with traditional databases, just data warehousing and ADLS tend to. So something to think about. All right, so basically what we went over is we looked at the 80-20 rule. We looked at specific designs for large data models, aggregation tables, and then talked about different model types. So what I just want to mention again is that you really ought to sign up for Ignite if you haven't, because there's going to be a whole bunch of really cool Power BI announcements that I'm sure that will impact some of the stuff that I just mentioned. And it's free. And if a great thing to be doing next week, because it's 1 week from tomorrow is the 15th. So there you go. And with that, does anybody have any questions? And if you don't remember your questions, feel free to follow me on Twitter. I'm on there way too much because I keep on finding cool stuff on Twitter and I haven't done those other things. So stick to Twitter.
All right, thanks. Any questions? Speak up. I see applause coming in.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Tim. Or Tim would maybe give an applause and raise his hand quickly.
You caught me.
Only because I've experienced it before.
Hey, Ginger, this is Almond. Thank you so much for everything you went through. This is kind of not the point of what you were doing, but after you did that, you split the report into a thin report and a data set. And I thought it was going to say in the lower right-hand corner, connected live to, or whatever it normally says, but it says mixed. So I didn't know if there was something else in your file. I mean, it didn't prevent what you did still worked, right?
Yeah. That is a fine question that I didn't know the answer to, because it shouldn't have because I created a,
Oh, and these were hidden. These were hidden in the other view, right?
yeah,
That's right. Okay.
it's because I created some, my own tables to do some kinds of,
Sure. Like what if parameters or whatever. Yeah.
yeah, I was doing what if parameters with
Okay.
this, and this
No,
is a
that's
generated
cool.
table. But it does work if you don't have that, and generally speaking, I forgot I did it for this particular model. Then it'll be clean, but yeah, that's why, it's because I had these parameter things.
Yeah, but if you deleted them from this view, you would have deleted them too, right? You just do it from.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
I still don't know why I can't connect my own database to my machine. That's crazy.
Admin lock you out.
My least favorite message on the planet is contact your admin. I'm like, I contacted myself. I don't know what the hell's going on. So is this the where you can get the Star Schema, all the things?
Yeah, I got my own
Awesome.
copy a month or so ago. He's got some other stuff, so it's pretty nice. It's an okay shirt. So I have to make sure I bring it. I'm going to pass for a day next week, so I'll have to make sure I bring that along.
Yes.
Be
Yes.
fun.
Yeah, post a photo of it. This is cool.
Yeah. Hey, by the way, I'm glad I'm kind of a Kimball fanboy now.
Uh-huh.
The Kimball group reader is a collection of all their blog posts. That's a really good read too. And it's basically they're available. The blog posts are kind of available for free at their website, but the book collects it. Has a little bit of, organizes it a little differently than chronological and stuff. Not bad. And I'm actually reading that from cover to cover, just like I did the Toolkit book. Just even the ETL stuff I'm going to read too, because he actually says some good stuff about ETL. That could be useful. Oh, where is this? Yeah, I've been using the Bing thing. I even used it for some code today.
So by the way, for you Google bigots who don't want to use new technology, this is actually pretty cool.
Yeah, no. I think I used it to figure out how to query a Delta table to get the history. I mean, which is easy enough to find, but it worked.
I was showing it to my dad. I'm like, let's figure out how to change the battery in your car remote. And he was floored. I'm like, how do I change the car battery remote in a Buick Encore?
Yeah.
And it told him that, and told him what kind of batteries he needed and all that jazz.
Yeah. See, by the way, there are some old books at archive.org. You can't read all of them. I was trying to read a first edition of Inman's book, but I can only see a few pages. I can't actually borrow it or anything. And I'm not going to pay for an Inman book, so it's got to be free or otherwise.
Yeah, this is an ebook. See, so if I've got like the references here. So it's like there's a PDF version, and I can get a scanned version, or I
that's
can get
cool.
the
I'll have to
official
try that.
version.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you've not used the Chat GPT that Microsoft paid $10 billion for, you're losing out.
Oh Lord.
So yeah, and any of these links will just give you more information about it. So great
bonus
great idea.
bonus round of information for everybody.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking at this PDF version. And it's even, you can even download a version. This will work for, EPUB will work for Kindles.
Yeah, readers and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody got anything else? I do want to mention next month we're going to do something just a little bit different. We have somebody that's over in the UK, Sue. Donald, what's Sue's last name? Baines?
Sorry, Bays.
Yeah.
Sorry, I said it twice, but
Yeah. She's going to do a presentation for us, but because of the time zone differences, she's going to do it on one of our Thursday lunch sessions. And so I haven't talked, and this is your warning. We need to talk with the leaders whether we want to do something still on the first Tuesday of the month, or we just won't for December. And yeah, so I'll be getting the meetup announcement out for that pretty soon. Actually, I'm going to go ahead, turn off recording. So if anybody wants to bring up something, a question they didn't want on the recording, could do that.